In safety-sensitive environments, the margin for error is effectively zero. Every component, human or mechanical, must operate predictably and reliably. In our first video, we covered the history of alcohol and the human side of why people drink. In video 2, we examined the physiology of alcohol, its effects on the brain, and the Department of Transportation's exact thresholds. We are now looking at the mechanics of how alcohol misuse actually develops. It does not happen in a single dramatic moment. It builds gradually, quietly, and almost completely invisibly to the person going through it. For a professional carrying safety-sensitive responsibilities, the greatest vulnerability is rarely a sudden catastrophic failure. It is a slow, unnoticed behavioral shift that builds over time. This axis maps alcohol use as a continuous spectrum. On the far left, occasional social use. On the far right, physical dependency. Alcohol use isn't a binary choice between drinking responsibly and having a problem. There is massive territory in between. Most people who drink sit somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Their use is stable, not escalating, and not interfering with their work or relationships. They drink occasionally and without significant consequence. But the spectrum is fluid. In response to stressful periods, life transitions, or the accumulation of pressure over time, individuals slowly shift along this line. Because this movement occurs on a sliding scale rather than a sudden break, a worker's external performance can mask their internal dependency until the shift is already advanced. DOT-regulated workers face a highly specific set of stressors: long hours, irregular schedules, isolation, physical demands, and the constant pressure of operating where mistakes have severe consequences. This loop diagrams the initial feedback mechanism. When an individual carries that heavy occupational load, alcohol serves as a highly accessible, fast-acting tool to manually reduce the feeling of stress. Over time, physiology adapts. As alcohol is continually used to manage stress, the brain severs the system's original pathways. It stops maintaining its natural capacity to regulate stress independently. At this point, the brain begins to rely on the substance to regulate the stress response. The relief alcohol provides becomes something the brain expects and waits for, rather than something it produces on its own. The coping tool has become a load-bearing requirement. Removing alcohol at this stage means the baseline stress feels significantly larger than it did before. That manufactured pressure makes the next drink feel more necessary, and the cycle continues to tighten. This structural shift in how the brain handles stress is the engine driving all subsequent behavioral escalation. As the brain adapts internally, the results become visible externally through behavioral tolerance. Tolerance as a lived experience looks like this. What used to be 2 drinks to unwind becomes 3. What worked strictly on weekends quietly shifts to most nights. The individual is rarely making a conscious decision to consume more. They are automatically responding to the fact that what they were drinking before no longer produces the same result. To maintain that level of relief, the required volume must increase. Because each small increase feels like a minor, reasonable adjustment, noticing this unconscious increase in volume is a key early warning signal to identify from the inside. This grid outlines 6 distinct behavioral patterns that indicate an escalation is actively occurring. Pattern 1 is timing. An evening drink creeps into the afternoon, or begins the exact minute a shift ends, regardless of the hour. Pattern 2 is isolation. What was once a social activity steadily transitions into private, isolated consumption. Pattern 3 is volume. Sitting down with the intention of having 1 or 2 drinks, and consistently exceeding that plan. Pattern 4 is control. Making a genuine internal decision to stop drinking, and then failing to execute that decision. Pattern 5 is concealment. Minimizing or directly hiding the actual amount consumed from doctors, family members, or colleagues. Pattern 6 is cravings. Experiencing intrusive thoughts pulling toward alcohol during work or at times when drinking would be inappropriate. High-functioning individuals will often display these exact patterns first, masking them behind their ongoing professional performance. Any single one of these behaviors is a warning. As these patterns begin to overlap, the signal becomes clear that a systemic escalation is underway. Escalating alcohol use does not stay contained to off hours. It degrades the individual's entire operational system, beginning with subtle impacts on work performance. Professionally, reaction times become marginally slower. Situational awareness narrows. A worker develops a tendency to take procedural shortcuts that they would have previously rejected. In DOT-regulated roles, where the margin for error is effectively zero, even fractional degradation carries immense risk. Emotionally, internal regulation deteriorates. The individual experiences sharp increases in irritability and a loss of personal resilience when facing normal daily friction. Physically, the body takes a compounding hit. Disrupted sleep cycles lead to chronic fatigue, cardiovascular strain builds, and cumulative stress is placed on the liver. Relationally, the secrecy and emotional unavailability required to sustain heavy drinking put intense strain on family, partners, and close friends. While these effects compound over time, they are not inevitable. Addressing the behavior at the pattern stage allows for recovery before the damage reaches a point of crisis. To understand the stakes of the spectrum, we have to look at the difference between a pattern and a crisis. A pattern is the early stage. It is the built tolerance and behavioral routines that have not yet caused external damage. At this stage, the individual still holds their full range of professional and personal options. A crisis is the late stage. It is a DOT violation, a major health event, or a career consequence that cannot be undone. Recovering from a crisis is possible, but it requires significantly more time and effort to rebuild what was lost. Mapping this back to our spectrum, we identify the window of intervention in this space between the early pattern and the late-stage crisis. Waiting for a crisis to occur actively removes a professional's options. It turns a manageable behavioral correction into a career-threatening event. Recognizing an issue early does not require absolute certainty. It does not require a formal medical diagnosis or immediate drastic measures. It simply requires the honesty to look at your own behavioral patterns clearly and ask if they warrant attention. Proactive, confidential resources are available to you right now, long before a DOT violation ever occurs. In our fourth and final video, we will cover the full scope of those resources and lay out actionable intervention strategies. Alcohol escalation is a predictable, mechanical progression, but by recognizing the early patterns, you retain the power to stop it.